Here we are.
All
All
right.
right. Joey Izzo,
Hello.
writer, director, and editor
That's right.
of I Was There Too, a really cool film, superbly crafted, and nominated by Laura Beckner, and she was the filmmaker of Let Rebound, which was a pretty dope film as well. Joey, really great to have you on the show. How's it going?
Good. Thanks for having me.
And thanks for bearing through the 30 minutes trial and error of like getting on this thing.
Yeah, we had to try a lot of different devices and platforms, but we figured it out.
And that's the art of filmmaking, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Joey, your film was wow. I mean, in terms of the production and it's quite a chunk to break off. I mean, you had like so many people. The supporting cast was huge. A great movie. I really thought it was really original, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. Lead actor was really great. Again, you wrote, directed, and edited this thing, so you were buried in it. And the first question is your artistic inspiration for breaking it off and going through all that.
Yeah. Well, I guess the artistic inspiration kind of came from an online space actually first. A friend of mine shared like a mass shooting story online, and he was kind of the first in the cycle. It kind of happens in waves, and so this friend was like my first friend to share it. It's how I kind of heard about it first. And immediately he started to get all these likes and comments, and then it just started, and then I shared it myself, and then I was thinking about what I was doing, why I was sharing, and I tend to think that people in general, whether conscious of it or not, can have a lot of self-serving aspects to really good intentioned action. And so in this sense, he's a friend of mine. I'm sure his heart was in the right place, but the way that the internet is designed, it can't help but feed your own personal branding. In some ways it was kind of asserting his own sense of identity and brand, and kind of making himself look good, either inadvertently, or you could do it for perhaps more manipulative reasons. And so then that made me start to think about how and why somebody would potentially lie about something in order to win favor, or get something that they wanted. That in this type of culture of where there's a lot of interest in identifying with certain causes or a tragedy, if somebody can personify that kind of terror and trauma, there's a place for victims and survivors, but there's also an opportunity for somebody to come into that space and wreak havoc, a kind of like wolf in sheep's clothing, I guess. And so
that's a super dope starting point. I mean, it's really
Yeah.
interesting. There's like this idea and this inspiration around, well, how do we construct identities by what do we focus and what do we share with others? And I think it's probably a good point for you to can you please summarize a nice little synopsis of what the film's about?
Yeah, the film is about struggling divorced dad who's kind of put himself into a corner and fucked up a lot of his life, and stumbles kind of on a mass shooting that had previously happened, and figures out a way to lie about being there and surviving it in order to get back into the good graces of his ex-wife and 12-year-old daughter. So it's basically that he lies about surviving this mass shooting, you know, in order to win sympathy and affection that he so desperately desires from a family that he's about to be completely estranged from. So,
Yeah. So
yeah.
So that's awesome. So then you took this germinal idea of like, you know, these sharing these posts and what it all means, and sort of the nuanced language of the, you know, this culture of, you know, online community. And then you took that and built it up and inflated this into this, you know, huge lie. And how does that play out in another context? So I guess I'm wondering, okay, so the jump, so this inspirational leap from, isn't it interesting how we kind of build our identity or our brand or whatever it is in this like online, you know, posting world to, well, to gain something, right? So we're trying to gain something from others. And then here's this other dude who's like, oh my God, he's using like the extreme version of that to gain essentially sympathy, compassion from a family that he's been estranged from.
Yeah.
And so to me, the film was not so much about the lie, but it was really about this desire for, and this human need for compassion and sympathy and love.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I like to write, you know, I'm sure you're not the first filmmaker. I'm not the first filmmaker to say this, but I like to write very complex characters. And what makes a character complex or interesting to me is not a sense of moral bankruptcy or moral virtuosity, but it's really that they have their own interests. They have grounded, relatable interests, like very basic, simple interests. You know, get back in with my family, receive affection, receive love. You know, they're motivated by very common interests that I find very relatable. And but I use that as an exploration to see how, you know, people's emotional instabilities or needs and desires, you know, drive them to places that we might otherwise think are, you know, morally bankrupt or are suspect. So, yeah, I don't like to create villains or heroes, but really like an exploration of behavior is really cool, you know. And so if I can make that as difficult for an audience to reject, in terms of, you know, if he was an outright sociopath or an outright type of villainous manipulator, you know, then I think the audience can easily check out from that experience. But you ground it in this type of family values. You ground it in this story that we've kind of seen, like the dad trying to win the family back. You know, I mean, it's basically Mrs. Doubtfire, you know, but done in a way that hopefully is more currently culturally relevant and in my own style and my tonal interests. And so, but it works very similarly, you know, like that movie is attempting the same thing. Like, you know, what would you do to win your family back? And I guess, you know, maybe a Hollywood movie might see that as heroic, you know, like you do anything to get your family back, you know. But I guess I question that concept.
You know, the next question is, what's the message of the film? What do you think the film's saying? And if I can jump in, yeah, answer my own question about your film. Is because I'm excited to, you know, the exciting thing is that, you know, it brings up these ideas, right? And that's what, you know, really as filmmakers we want to do, is to have audiences get excited about, oh, these ideas that we're, you know, raising and issues that we're raising. So, you know, to spin it in that direction, which is the truth, that, you know, your film accomplished that. You know, me as an audience member, I'm excited about sharing, hey, you know, to me, it's not so much what's wrong with Darius, but what's wrong with the ecosystem or the structure that he's in. Like, why does he have to even do that? this desperate measure of attention. I mean, there's, you know, he seems like a decent enough guy. If the system was set up differently, then, you know, there wouldn't be a need for him to do that. So it's less about, right?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I had like a kind of clear, pithy answer. I love that explanation. I think it's apt. I think, yeah, I really was trying to make a movie about something that bothered me, you know, that kind of stirred me, and one I don't really fully understood, and kind of in terms of there are no solutions really to it, and you're right to talk about the space and how it can kind of create this opportunity for this character to do something like this, and maybe perhaps that's the problem. But to me, there's also like a kind of real character-centered issue at the heart of the movie, and it you know, taking that initial kind of broad, high concept premise of what would you do to get your family back, I guess my answer to that is like a kind of cautionary tale. Like, you could get away with it, definitely in this kind of post-truth moment of us. Like, it doesn't matter if he's lying or not. Like, you know, it's not really, like you said, about the lie, but it's really about how we lie to ourselves and how we're willing to kind of sabotage the soul at the expense of external gain, even if it seems like the most important thing in the world. Like, what good is it to get our family back if we have nothing real to give, you know? Like, they've taken this guy back, but this guy back is a fraud, and he has to live with this lie. And that's the feeling of unsettledness that I really wanted to leave the audience with on a personal level. There's, as you're mentioning, there are definitely cultural ramifications and insight that I hope that the film brings up, but just in terms of the nuts and bolts character, he's kind of a husk of a man, and surrounded by all these people in a very intense moment of reflection and mourning. And I think I see the kind of void in his eyes. You know, like, I just see this emptiness, that he's gotten everything that he wants, but he doesn't realize the great sacrifice that comes with manipulation and fraud and lying, you know, is really himself, and a sense of grounded density to the soul. And I guess you could kind of abstract that to our culture, that if we are looking for these externalized things to self-identify so much, especially in an online space, it can sometimes leave us quite rudderless and without a sense of a core, you know, and we start kind of, yeah. So that's my basic pitch of.
I mean, that's a huge cautionary tale for anyone, and it's certainly very relevant in a culture that's driven by consumption and you know, fuel to consume. And so, you know, that's a very scary world, and one that we can all, you know, we're all in. So it's, you know, we all have to keep that kind of like balance and reflect on the core of who we are and what makes us human. And you know, that's, you know, what he said is huge, and a great message for anyone. You know, the answer, you know, he said, oh, I don't know if there's any one answer, but you know, I think there is. I think that's truth, you know, and communication. And so if this guy came back to his family and said, hey, look, I'm totally, you know, I feel horrible about myself. I feel like I'm just, you know, I'm dressing like I'm in the 1970s. I live in an apartment that looks like the 1980s. I'm totally broke. I can't provide anything, you know, directional for my daughter, but I love her. How can you help me? You know, I'll do anything, you know, to take me back into this family. And so, you know, that's kind of one side of it. And the other side of it is that, you know, here you have this family that's not giving this man any direction either. They're just judging him for his, you know, emotional outbursts, which sort of totally justified. And if they had sympathy and compassion, right? If those two characters had the sympathy and compassion, and say, hey, this guy's just emotionally broke, he's, destitute, let's help him somehow, incrementally bring him back. Look, you got to go to therapy if you want to get back into this family, so you're done. Something. But the only time that they give him any compassion or sympathy is when he, comes at them with this, totally overblown incident, which is so out of the realm of, most people's reality. It's just an exceptional kind of incident where all of a sudden they're like broken to have to act compassionately in the situation. So is their compassion real, or is it just like this forced kind of behavior that, oh, this is what we should be doing in this context, and now that we can, everybody's happy, we're all lying to one another, and look, we're playing this game.
And that's where I have a lot of sympathy for Darius. I think the reason why he's able to pull off the lie so well, to me, and this is a conversation that the actor and I also had, was that he truly feels like a survivor. I think he understands, these people, and
he is a survivor in his own context.
He is. He absolutely is. And the specifics of it are not true, but there is an emotion. There is, and that's where it gets a little bit complicated. But I think I did feel a lot of empathy for the character, and I think it stems from the fact that he can so utterly relate, and and this is, and so he uses this thing in order to superficially connect this family that is denying him that level of empathy, and perhaps he deserves it, perhaps he doesn't. We don't know necessarily the full story, of their history, but certainly I think that he understands the plight, and he understands the struggle, and I think that's why he's able to pull it off.
Definitely. All right. So last question is, what did you learn in the process of making this film, looking back on it, and how has it changed you?
What did I learn? That's a good question. I mean, I guess I ultimately learned more about myself and my own interests, and what scares me about my own behavior. I don't set out to make autobiographical films. This did not happen to me, nor did anything happen to me that I've written about, but they're entirely personal, very, very personal. And
I think that's just has to be there to make any work of art, right?
Yeah, but the joy of making art, though, is sometimes that revelation only comes after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm writing it, I'm all about the character and trying to service the script and do the best job that I can do. But one of the most rewarding things is that once it's framed up and it's finished and you're seeing it with people, your perspective changes.
You're like, holy shit, that's me.
So I get to reflect on my own life and think about the things that are really bothering me about my behavior or the behavior of my friends and family. And so on a very personal level, the things that I learned is about personal identity and being truthful to oneself and the value of that, and how it's really not about I guess winning a system or winning favor, certainly, and that and
that's awesome. So Joey, I'm sorry to cut you off, but I got it. What is it about?
The answer is I think quite simple. I mean, if you are found in a place where you have lied to somebody or lied to yourself ultimately, and no matter what the outcome is, good or bad. So if you got what you wanted, I think you're going to find yourself personally lost. And I think the answer is to try and avoid that kind of pattern. And that despite whatever outcome may come, you have to, be honest with yourself and attempt a more enriched sense of living, and be willing to, if you lose your family, you lose your family. If you lose your job, you lose your job. If you quit filmmaking, you quit filmmaking. But that there's nothing more valuable. And I think, it's that to me is the kind of personal lesson. I would say, is that when you feel yourself threatened and you feel like your world is going to collapse, it's important not to lose sight of yourself and all of that, and not to just try and get back what you once had, or get something that you think that you deserve. That kind of behavior is going to leave you with nothing in the end. So,
and I think the point. We've heard the message. Honesty is the best policy. It's an aphorism that we hear, but I think what you said so poignantly is losing a sense of living. What's the real loss? Yeah,
there's a starvation of honesty, I think, in our culture, and it kind of breeds a lack of trust. And I think I'm somewhat, I'm worried about that, and I'm trying to write stories that invoke that feeling, that explore the tension around the distrust that we have of one another, and yet the deep desire we have to connect with each other, and how those two things are kind of, working against one another.
Yeah, it's beautiful, man, because that all of a sudden, from that lens of the cultural distrust and connection, that self-serving need, and then this of consuming things and people's love, and then this need to connect with people, and how are those like cross purposes, and when. I mean, that's a huge topic, and definitely frames the entire movie in this like broad context. Very cool, Joey. It's a beautiful flick, and really well done, and it was a pleasure to check it out. Honored to meet you and have you on the show. Thanks a lot, man.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Definitely. Very welcome. All right, Joey. Till our paths cross again, and everybody at Play It Forward. Catch you later.
See you later.
Thank you, Joey. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in this week. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe and leave us a like and or comment. It makes a big difference. Play It Forward is brought to you by Digipops, where we're building a community to put film and filmmaker discovery in your hands. Here, filmmakers and fans, the creative class, recognizes each other fairly and transparently through a community-curated film festival each quarter. It's coming soon. Thank you.